Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina wa Mawlana Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahabati ajma'in. Allahumma inni nawaitu at-ta'allum wa ta'lim wa tadhakkur wa tadhkir wa naf'u al-intifa' wal ifada wal istifada wal hatha ala tamassuki bi kitabillahi wa sunnati rasulihi sallallahu alayhi wa sallama wa ad-du'a ila al-huda wa ad-dalala ala al-khair. Assalamu alaykum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuhu.
Wa alaykum salam.
Alhamdulillah. So I'd first and foremost like to thank my dear brother, Shaykh Faiz, for so generously, as always, inviting me into his gatherings and for giving me space here to share some words with you all on this blessed occasion, in this blessed month of Rabi al-Awwal. As we know that Rabi in Arabic is rendered into English as the spring. And the nature of spring is that it serves to bring that which is dead back to life. Because over the winter months, when it gets cold, and we're all used to this, things tend to pass away. And the spring is miraculous in that it brings these things which are dead back to life. And so if we just see that idea of things which are literally dead coming back to life by virtue of just a turning of the earth in a certain direction, that it's important to keep in mind then that what does it mean that when the Prophet ﷺ is sent in the month of Rabi' al-Awwal, that it's the first spring, he is the first spring. And in other words, he is the one that not only can he bring back things which are non-living, but more importantly, and perhaps even more miraculously, to bring back hearts which had become dead and bring them back to life. And so today I just want to speak about and share a few words on this idea of the sunnah and the fitra. And when we look at the word fitra, we'll see that in the Arabic language, fatara, yafturu, it literally means to something upon something by which something is created. So in other words, you can say fatir as-samawat, it's one of the ways that Allah describes the creation of the heavens and the earth as a futur, something which is, as they say in English, created from nothing. And so the fitra is the idea that just as the heavens and the earth have been created with a particular balance, that they've been created with a particular characteristic and characteristics, and in a certain way, and that way is what we term nature. In the same way, a human being has also been created with what's termed a fitra. So just as nature has a fitra, and it's almost like saying nature has a nature, I know, but just as nature has a fitra, the way that it's been created, likewise human beings, man also has a fitra. There's a way that man has been created in a certain balance with certain characteristics. Now, part of our nature is that before that we were even sent into this world, we know that we had a prior existence. It wasn't the case that our existence only came to be once we came into the world, once we had our wilada, our birth, when we were born. That's not the point that we come into existence. That's our worldly existence. We come into the dunya at that point. But our existence predates that. And part of this existence that predates our worldly existence involved a covenant that we took with Allah Azza wa Jal. And in this covenant, we are told in the Quran, Allah in fact mentions it, that he says that when your Lord brought forth from the children of Adam, from his seed, from their seed, and made them testify of themselves. What did Allah make us testify? He said, Alastu bi rabbikum, am I not your Lord? And what was the response? Inshallah, the response from all of us was, Bala, shahidna. Yes, of course, we testify. And Allah tells us, in fact, that that was lest you should say on the day of Qiyamah, oh, we were unaware of this. So we've already taken that covenant before we've even stepped foot into the world, before we've even been born. So in other words, our fitra, the thing and the characteristic, the traits upon which Allah has created us, have already testified to the fact that we accept that there is Allah, and we've borne witness to that altogether. And then it's only subsequent to that that we are sent into the world in our Adamic form, in the form that we have and that we see here. And so we can see that if we trace the idea of fitra in and around the concept of the Prophet ﷺ coming with the deen al-fitra, because Islam is also referred to as the deen al-fitra. And we'll see that as a starting point, that if we look at the place, the actual place where the Prophet ﷺ was sent, Makkah, this is the place that Allah chose to send his final and most beloved messenger and his final message. And what we'll notice about this place is that it's not a built-up civilization such as the neighboring Roman and Persian empires. All one had to do is go in those directions a few hundred miles and they'll see built-up civilization in both the Roman and the Persian Empire. But we're seeing that in the Arabian Peninsula, where the Prophet ﷺ was sent by Allah Azza wa Jal, he's being sent to a place of primordial simplicity. Completely simple. There's no structures. There's no civilization. It's what we would term going back to roots, going back to how things really were. And what we see, that what's the one structure that exists in Makkah at that time? It's the Kaaba, the great Kaaba al-Musharrafa. It was already there when the Prophet ﷺ came into this world. It's a simple cubic structure made of earth, made of bricks. Its composition, its constitution is the earth. There can be nothing more simple than the Kaaba, just a square, 4 corners that essentially symbolize the 4 points on a compass. A deep symbolism there, because it's telling us that it's encompassing every single human being from every single deep valley, as Allah tells us, from min kulli fajjin amiq. It's pointing in each direction on a compass. And it's telling us that each individual towards whom this compass is pointing, this is their return. The point of absolute earthen primordial simplicity in the shape and the form of the Kaaba. In fact, if you look at our beliefs, that's the place where the Prophet ﷺ was sent. But look at the belief that he was sent with, and of course all prophets are sent with this belief. It's in its purest and in its simplest form. It's so straightforward. It requires no priests. Someone wants to take the Shahada, they don't need to go to the Imam in the masjid. They don't need to find someone who's learned in the deen. They just need to find someone who calls themselves a Muslim, may not even pray, may not even fast, just need someone to witness the Shahada. And in fact, even if there weren't anyone around, say someone was in a place that there were no Muslims, they don't need to turn to anyone apart from Allah and just bear witness that they are accepting Islam as their fitra, which is a fitra of a human being. No requirements for any priests or any paraphernalia, just a person and Allah. And if you look at our practices are also a reminder of this fitra, of this simplicity. Take, for example, the Hajj and Umrah. What do we see when we go there? Everyone is dressed the same as one. Simple. Because it's reminding us of our covenant to Allah. There is no discernment or understanding of who may be rich and who may be poor, who may be knowledgeable and who may be not so much, who may be of a certain status in life and who may... There's no concept and no way that we can tell that when everyone is dressed the same. And not only are we dressed the same, we are hardly, if you want to call it, being dressed. Because that garment that we wear is not a dress. We don't go out like that. It's not how we go. I mean, we can say, okay, we all have to wear white trousers and a white shirt or a white thobe. Everyone wears it. It could have been easy, just wear a white thobe. But this garment that we're wearing is not even a dress. it's not even stitched. It can't be stitched. It's just a plain and simple white cloth that serves to remind us of the purity of the fitra. No one can tell anyone from who they are by just looking at them in terms of this cloth that they're wearing. And then if we look at the prayer, the salah is that moment, that type of act where the most honorable and honored part of a human being, what's the most honorable and most honored part of a human being? The intellect. As we've mentioned many times, the intellect is the reason why we stand in front of Allah on a day of rising, on a day of Qiyamah, to give hisab, to give account for what we've done. If we did not have intellect, we would not be standing in front of Allah. And so the intellect associated in some ways as it is, I know it's not completely the way that the Muslim scholars look at it, but in some ways associated with what's in our brain, what's in our mind. In the prayer, we see that that's the point that we find the intellect touching the ground, the earth. It's touching the place from where it comes. It's a complete act of submission and humility. Again, an act of reconnecting from the thing that we came from, the fitra, the earth, something which is so unique and so simple. And so we can see our practices are a reminder of this. And what we'll notice that if we take the fitra in our worship, whether it be Sawm, fasting, or the salah, the prayer, the hajj, umrah, any act of fasting, what we'll see is that clearly this is not enough. Why is it not enough? Because our fitra is necessarily so extended to our lived lives. In other words, the things that we do outside of the times that we're praying, outside of the times when we're fasting, outside of the times where we're performing hajj and umrah. We did this exercise once in one of our majalis where we tried to calculate the number of hours that it would amount to if we collected all of the prayers that we did a day, and someone lived for about 80 years. And we said it barely amounts to 1 year if we accumulated all of those 5 prayers every single day for a period of about 80 years. Barely amounts to a year's worth of worship in a life that's 80 years long. It's not a lot, is it? So clearly, our fitra isn't specific or limited to the fact that we worship. Our fitra must extend to what's outside of the worship, to our lived lives, our daily existence. Because otherwise, if we worship according to one vision, in other words, while we worship, we are trying to attune ourselves to the fitra. We're trying to do it according to the fitra while we worship. But then when we live our lives according to another vision, this is what creates disturbance and imbalance in our soul. Because what we're doing is we're doing something which it's not congruent with the other. We're worshipping and we're trying to be attentive to the fact that this is who we are and this is what we must do. This is why we're created. But then we go and live our lives in a way which doesn't accord to that vision. And so you have the vast majority of our life, the decades of our lived existence, which isn't taken up with worship, but it's taken up with something else which moves us away from the fitrah. And then we get this imbalance. We get these uncertainties in our lives, because what we're doing is that we're creating confusion in our souls. And some religions, as we know, that they allow their followers to live an entirely secular life outside of worship. No problem. If your deen is going to a particular place of worship on a particular day at a particular time, and that amounts to your religious commitment, that's fine. You can live the entire rest of the week in a completely secular way, and the religion legislates for that, no problem. But then that's why you have this lack of understanding in other religions about the fact of what religion is. What does it mean to have a covenant with Allah when He says to you, Alastu bi Rabbikum, am I not your Lord? What does that actually mean when we speak about our fitrah and trying to live our lives in accordance with the fitrah? But of course, as Muslims, we recognize that this is absurd. We can't be two different people. We can't be people who worship in a certain way and live our lives 9 to 5 or whichever hours we may choose in an entirely different way. This might make us look strange. Who can live a life of fitra outside of worship? Yeah, we have to do things that don't go in accordance with how people live their lives nowadays. And this may make us strangers. But that's okay, because the role of a Muslim is to be a stranger to the dunya. That's the whole point. If you look at the companions, they were strangers in the very place that they were born. They became strangers to the very people that they grew up with and their families. That's exactly the purpose of a Muslim and what it means. We must be strangers, especially when the requirements of the time and the place that we live in have become so excessively focused on the material. How can we become people who are not strangers to that? It shouldn't even have to be something that we have to remind ourselves of. It should be something that even whether you're someone who's religious or not, you should be running away from the excessive materialism of the age that we live in. It's not something that's conducive to the human being, because no matter if someone's religious or not religious, everyone is still a human being and everyone still has a soul. And so long as someone has a soul, their soul will feel disturbed by this excessive materialism that we find ourselves in today. And so that's why the Prophet ﷺ, we hear in a hadith, Tuba lil ghuraba, like glad tidings to those who are the ghuraba, the strangers. So we want to be the strangers. Being a stranger is a good thing for us. It's not a bad thing. And it's something that we should strive to seek. Then if we look at the coming back to the concept of the prayer, it's one of the deepest manifestations of the fitra, the salah. We're told that the salah, inna salata tanha anil fahsha'i wal munkar. What is fahsha and what is munkar? Fahsha is corrupt behavior. Munkar is detestable things which are reproachable. The prayer is supposed to bar us from that. It's supposed to put up a barrier to that. What is it telling us? That the prayer is the compass that realigns us back towards the fitrah. Because the prayer is the thing that serves that purpose. If we're not seeing that as a result, it means we're not doing it correctly. We're not doing it with presence. Oftentimes we get asked this question, how do I get khushu in my prayer? And the answer to that is very, very simple. It's not about khushu in the prayer. It's about having khushu outside the prayer. Because it will be a very schizophrenic personality that can attempt to have khushu in the prayer while completely foregoing that idea when they leave the prayer. But it's in line with complete balance and fitrah if we strive to achieve khushu outside of the prayer. Because what's khushu? Khushu is being present. Present where? Present with Allah. Present with a moment. It's knowing that Allah is aware of all that we do. The more that we can achieve that state outside the prayer, the more that we're going to be achieve that state inside the prayer. And it doesn't stand to reason that we can think that we pay no attention or little attention to the idea of hudur, of presence and khushu', that we pay no attention or little attention to outside the prayer, and somehow within the prayer we can have khushu'. It doesn't work like that. So the question is an incorrect question. There can never be this idea that how can I have khushu' in my prayer, i.e. just focusing on my prayer. That's not the question. The real solution is to attempt to have khushu' and presence in our lives. In other words, having a state of fitra outside the prayer will naturally lead to having that balanced and natural state inside the prayer. Of course it will. Because we're not seeing any disconnect between being outside and inside the prayer. Yes, being inside the prayer is being inside a moment of great majesty. It's drawing our attention in a way that maybe day-to-day life may distract us. Correct. We may have a higher sense of awareness, a higher sense of presence, a higher sense of attentiveness. That's correct. But that doesn't mean that we don't strive to gain as much of those things outside the prayer to help us once we're in the prayer. And so the prayer is fitrah. And it's fitrah as long as we are in fitrah. And if we are in fitrah, we'll see that the prayer is a transformative thing. It cannot be a mechanical thing. What did the great Hassan al-Basri say? Rabi anhu. He said, any prayer in which one is not attentive or is not mindful of what's happening in the prayer is closer to being punishable than being rewarded, or something to that effect, he said. In other words, one of the most loftiest things that we can think about the prayer, hasha and la samahallah, can be something that we are punished for as opposed to being rewarded for, because it becomes mechanical. A robot can do it. Now we have AI. We can ask the AI to pray, right? Of course, the AI can't pray. We have something that other beings don't have. So the prayer must not be mechanical. It must be something which is transformative. And so what we'll see here then is that the beautiful thing about the fitra is that it is timeless. Timeless in the sense that we don't have to belong to a certain period of existence to have it. Why? Because that's how we're created. We're created with the fitra. It doesn't belong to any particular time period. It belongs to us. Whether we were existing in this time, in this existence in the dunya, or whether it was before we came into the dunya, we have always had it. And in that sense, it's timeless because it doesn't concern itself with any particular age or epoch. And not only is it timeless, but it's also, it transcends space. We don't have to have, there is no concept of having the fitra if you live in a certain part of the world. If you're born in it would be unfair. Unfair that you have the fitra in the Yemen and don't have the fitra in the West. Yes, the argument stands that there are things which call towards a rebalancing of your fitra in sacred places. Of course, that's we accept that. But that's not because of the fitra itself. That's because the environments that have been set up, they have been set up in such a way that they make returning to our fitra, our natural state, easier. But if we live in places where communities and societies have been set up to forget our fitra, to forget our natural state, then of course it's not going to be conducive to leading a life that reminds us of who we are and where we came from and where we're going. And so in this sense, as I've said, the fitra is a timeless as well as a concept which transcends space. Some people try to turn away, for instance, from the excesses of modernity. They try to turn away from that by adopting what we would call a natural lifestyle. Natural lifestyle, shunning synthetic materials. Don't want to eat things which have chemicals in there. Don't want to have something which is farmed a certain way. Don't want to use these synthetic chemical-laden deodorants or aftershaves or toothpaste and whatnot. You know, I want to live a natural lifestyle, right? But the question here is this: what good would it do if we're shunning one form of lifestyle, i.e. the excessive materialist lifestyle, and we're adopting another form of life, i.e. this natural way that we're looking for, without really understanding what it is that we're trying to ultimately achieve? What is it that we're trying to get from these alternative natural lifestyles? Something in our fitra is telling us, look, the way that you're living your life right now, the way that the modern world is set up, with all this excessiveness of materiality, it's something that it doesn't sit with me. We say that to ourselves as human beings. So to counter that, what do we do? The solution is less chemicals and less synthetic materials, and that's going to bring me back to some kind of balance, some kind of peace in who I am. No, because we'll go into a natural lifestyle, but we don't know why we're doing it. We don't know what it's there for. We don't know how it relates to the fitra in a real sense. The real lifestyle is adopting the sunnah as a perfect example of the fitra. That's the lifestyle that we all want to have. There is no other lifestyle. We can choose many different types of lifestyles. Look at the way we dress today. Look at the way we eat today. Look at the way we live our lives today. We live them and we dress and we do all the things that we do Because whether we know or don't know, whether we like it or don't like it, it's because we are influenced by someone or something or some movement or some fad. Everything that we have, the socks that we wear, the trainers that we wear, the trousers that we wear, the watches that we have on our wrists, the cars that we drive, the homes that we live in, the horticulturist that comes to fix our gardens, every single thing that we do is influenced by something. It's a decision that we take, and we take them on autopilot, because the way that we've been influenced right now is not giving us time to take a step back and think, what is it that I'm really supposed to be doing here? What does it mean to go back to the primordial nature, to the fitra? What does it mean to adopt the sunnah as my lifestyle? I want to know how the Prophet ﷺ lived his life, because that way all of our issues will be resolved. Nothing remains. Why? Because clearly that's our belief. Our belief is that by adopting the way of the Prophet ﷺ, by adopting the sunnah, by understanding that the sunnah is the perfect example of the fitrah, that's how we're going to create balance in our life. And we'll see that, look at the way that this primordial nature, this fitrah of the Prophet ﷺ, look how it's described by Hujjatul Islam, the great Imam al-Ghazali. And I always like reading this in the time of Rabi, because it's such a beautiful reminder of what it means to have the perfect manifestation of the fitrah in our lives, i.e. the Prophet ﷺ. And so Imam al-Ghazali describes the Prophet ﷺ in his Ihya in the following way, and it's a remarkable description. He says that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, that he was a mildest of men. Now keep in mind, every one of these descriptions that we're going to listen to right now is a description of fitrah. It's a description of who we must be. It's a description of what we must strive to be like, and what the goal is. That the Prophet ﷺ was the mildest of men, but he was also the bravest and most just of men. Because look, when you say someone's mild, it may mean that they're timid. It may mean that they're weak. It may mean that they are not brave. No. The fact that the Prophet ﷺ was mild, yet at the same time he was a warrior. He was the bravest of men. And look, being just requires courage, because being just can be difficult when we have to be just against ourselves, and when we may have to, on occasion, be just against those who are beloved to us, people who are close to us, our family members. Justice requires courage. But Imam al-Ghazali is telling us that the Prophet ﷺ was the mildest of men, but also a warrior, the bravest of men, and the most just of men. He was the most restrained of people. He was the most restrained, even though he had the power to make any changes that he wanted to do. But he was the most restrained of human beings, never touching the hand of a woman over whom he did not have rights. Such a powerful idea. Because when someone gets power, one of the things that they begin to abuse is the fact that they have authority over people. And when they begin to have authority over people, they'll start doing things which are unbecoming and not legislated by the Sharia. The Prophet ﷺ never touched the hand of any woman that was not his mahram, ever. That is the Sharia. It's a dastur. It doesn't matter what any scholar tells you. It does not matter what any scholar does. If a scholar does not behave in accordance with the Sharia, as the great Imams tell us, don't even turn to look at him or even her. It makes no difference, because the example is the Prophet ﷺ. And so the Imam goes on and tells us that he was the most generous of men, so that never did a gold or silver coin spend the night in his house. Because generosity takes courage. Shaykh Faiz has often mentioned this in many of his gatherings, that to be miserly and to be a coward in the Arabic language go hand in hand. To be a miser, to be stingy, and to be a coward are two traits that go hand in hand. But to be a warrior and to be brave and to be generous go hand in hand. Because why? To be generous takes courage. Look at this. Which person can have it so that they never would leave a gold or silver coin in their house at night? We don't need to put our hands up to say who would do that, because we know none of us can. The reason why none of us can is because we're afraid. But the Prophet ﷺ was never afraid. He never let anything stay in his house. No sooner did it come is no sooner did it leave. What can be more courageous than that? What can be the most perfect manifestation of balance and tawakkul? Because the Prophet ﷺ knows that it's the haqq, the truth, i.e. Allah, that's in control of all affairs. He's going to bring everything to pass. There's nothing to worry about. If something remained at the end of the day because he had not found someone to give it to, and it became night, the Prophet ﷺ would go out and he would not return home until he had given it to someone in need. Allahu Akbar. This is the Prophet of Allah. He could give it to someone to give it to someone. He could say, can you go and give this in a charity somewhere you might know? No. He took it upon himself, responsibility. It's a big word with a capital R. Something which we lose in the modern age, responsibility. Not outsourcing it to someone else as we do with so much of our lives, but rather taking it in our own hands and solving the problems that we know that are out there. Poverty is an issue. Poverty is a problem. Being in need is not something which is not something that we want to. We ask Allah to not make us dependent on anyone apart from Him. And so if someone becomes dependent on another human being, Allah, that's not an easy thing to be. And so the Prophet ﷺ would himself go out and relieve the burdens of people. From what Allah gave him, he would only take the simplest and easiest of foods, dates and barley, giving anything else away in the path of Allah. Allahu Akbar. Fitra. We can almost list the points here. Even his diet is fitra. Of course it is. His whole essence is fitra. He is fitra. He used to mend his own, never did he refuse a gift for which he was asked. So in other words, whenever someone would ask the Prophet ﷺ for something, he'd always give it to them. He never refused it. Can you imagine being in a company of the Prophet ﷺ and he has a beautiful shawl or something that he has, and you're just saying to him, Ya Rasulullah, and just straight up, just ask him, I would like that. Do you think he's ever going to say no? That's fitra, right? I'm not giving anyone any ideas to take Shaykh Faiz's shawls, obviously. No, I see some. I see my brother Asif there, glancing towards Shaykh Faiz. Forgive me, Saidi. I didn't mean to. I often covet Shaykh Faiz's shawls myself, but I never tell him. Nah. But look at this. He used to mend his own sandals and used to patch his own clothes, and he would serve his family and he would help them to cut meat. This is what it means to be courageous, responsible, mild, brave, and a warrior. Despite all the responsibilities that he had, he was a prophet that was a leader of a nation. But despite all of that, he would patch his own clothes and mend his own shoes, and he would help in the house. That's exactly it. He was the shyest of men. It's a very important point here. He was the shyest of men so that his gaze would never remain long in the face of anyone else. When you see great people of great dignity and the people of Allah that you'll meet in your lives, you'll see that they very rarely hold gaze with you. They have this shyness about them. Their gaze will oftentimes be down. They're not brash. They're not, quote unquote, this modern form of macho-ness where it's in your face. I need to look at you and keep my stare intent on you. People are taught this, in fact, how to lock in a gaze, how to show your confidence in a certain scenario by making sure that you look someone in the eye. Yeah, there may be moments for that, but the way of the Prophet ﷺ is a way of shyness. He wasn't someone who looked people in the face for long. In fact, most of his quote-unquote looking was towards the earth, not towards the faces of people. And there's many commentaries on why the Prophet ﷺ would never look people in the face for too long. He would accept the invitation of a free man or a slave. and he would accept the gifts that were given to him, even if they were no more than a gulp of milk or the thigh of a rabbit. A rabbit doesn't have a thigh. It's like it's one morsel. In other words, whatever was given to him, the Prophet ﷺ would accept it as a gift, even if it was these small things. And he would always offer something in return. He never consumed anything given in sadaqah. He was not too proud to reply to a slave girl or to a pauper in rags. He would only become angry for his Lord, never for himself. He would cause truth and justice to prevail, even if this led to discomfort to himself or to his companions. And there's so much more. I mean, it actually goes on for pages, but just the first paragraph, I think, is enough just to give us an idea about the perfection is. And anyone who wants to know, it's in book 19 of the Ihya Ulumuddin. I think it's translated, so everyone can get hold of that, just to read that entire description. It should be a description that we have printed out and read every single day if we can, to remind ourselves. And so this, through his fitra, through who the Prophet ﷺ is, we can see what he unites the Arabian tribes. They'd never been united ever before, ever. They never had a central authority. They were at loggerheads, at war with one another. The Prophet ﷺ unites the Arabian tribes. He takes them from the barrel of idol worship, the purest form of monotheism, Tawheed. A group of people who were led by their emotions and by tribal affiliations and by just his fitra. That's what it was. His fitra caused everyone to unite. And he gave them a sacred law. And he taught them a system of worship, a system of self-restraint. These are a group of people that nowadays we hear this, in London, for example, that, there's these knife crimes that are going on, and people seem to be angry. They don't know why. And someone says something to someone, and over one comment, someone goes and stabs someone. These are the Arabs, and even worse. The Arabs would kill over the slightest of things at that time. The Prophet ﷺ, to this group of people, he taught them self-restraint. And he taught them how to attain to the fruits of spirituality. Right? Think about that for a second. These were people who had buried their daughters alive. To this group of people, he taught self-restraint. Allahu Akbar. Our task is nothing compared to that task. No. And so what we'll see in conclusion here then is that the Prophet ﷺ is someone who, through his sunnah, through his fitra, through the fact of who he is, he's not someone who runs away from the world. He lives in the world. But while he's living in the world, he has a sense of detachment from the dunya and a sense of how to behave in the dunya and how to comport with people that are in the dunya and how to take care of every event and every circumstance and situation that arises. But within the fact that he lives in the dunya, he's not running away from it. When the revelation comes down in Hira, the Prophet ﷺ is straight into Meccan society, right? He's with the people. And what we see is that alongside that, the Prophet ﷺ would have his long nightly vigils. So he had his solitude. He had his time away where it was just him and Allah. Right? So we can see again a perfect balance of how it is to bring into our lives a structure and a form of practice which ultimately accords to our fitra. And one of the barriers that we have, or a couple of barriers, as many, is yes, it's the excess of modernity and the fact that we are bombarded with things that overwhelm our senses and overtake our desires. But even sometimes when we overcome that, we can become people that don't want the dunya. We can become indifferent from it, don't want it. But then we get stuck. We don't make those moves. We're sort of people that don't want the dunya, but neither are we really doing much else. And many a time, the reason why that is because we become lazy. And laziness is one of the things that the Prophet ﷺ asked Allah to protect us from. So that we have routine that's centered on benefiting ourselves and other people. And that we recognize that, we need to get out this state of slumber. this state of laziness, this state of just not doing anything and letting someone else do it. Change occurs not necessarily through many, many people coming together. Change occurs just by one person getting up and saying, I'm going to do it. And those who want to come with me, ahlan wa sahlan. And those who don't want to come with me, it makes no difference to me. And that's how it happens. So alhamdulillah, we'll stop here for today. Again, I'd like to thank Sheikh Faiz again for bringing me into your blessed gathering in your class. And I always learn a lot more than any of you do. So may Allah bless you all.